What's up everyone, it's Mel here with Treasuring Life. So far I've shown you how to find a representation of the state in each of the paintings for The Secret, A Treasure Hunt by Byron Preiss. I'm going to be showing you how to narrow down a representation of the city in each of the paintings, so stay tuned. Hopefully by now you've already watched my previous instructional episodes on what I like to call my Preiss Code, which just gives you the steps so far on what to look for in the paintings and in the verses. If you haven't already watched those previous episodes, I can put a link in the description so that you can go check those out. I do want to point out that most of the things that I'm mentioning in these episodes are my own findings. Either that or they're just common knowledge and they don't really require citing a reference. I also want to point out that I haven't gone through all of the comments on the wiki and Facebook groups. It just takes way too much time and I really wanted to go with my own findings. I would also like to say that the same disclaimer in the last episode is true for all episodes from here on out. Basically that these Preiss Code episodes are my own interpretation of the clues that I've broken down into a systematic approach so that each puzzle can be solved and each treasure can be found. That being said, everything I go over in these episodes is completely subjective and open to interpretation until a casque is actually recovered. I'll be ordering each of my instructional Preiss Code episodes so that each one builds off of the previous one, just because that's how it's easiest to convey to others. Okay, let's get to it. In the previous episode, I showed you either coordinates or a representation of the state in each of the paintings, or province in the case of Canada. Now we take things a step further to find the city. I'll be showing you a representation of an aerial view of a major waterway near a major city for each of the paintings. Since water is how immigrants first traveled to North America, it makes sense that Byron would include some kind of major waterway in the paintings. The representation of the waterway, however, will not be as obvious as the state was. Most of them will be large shapes in the paintings that are in obvious sight but not obvious enough to pick up on. And just like the representation of the state, these aren't going to be exact scale and proportion to what we can find on Google Maps today. But instead they're going to be more of a representation of the waterways. What we're looking for is a well-known major city near those major waterways. And just like Josh Gates says in the Secret episode for Expedition Unknown, once you see it, you see it. Byron gives us repetition by showing us coordinates that get us in the vicinity of a few cities, usually with only one of those cities being major and on water. Then Byron goes a step further to confirm that we have the correct city, and he'll give us landmarks that are iconic in that particular city. These landmarks are not always what you need to look for in order to find the casque though. Many of them are just to confirm that you have the correct city, so try not to let these landmarks fool you. The only two images that I've found that do not have coordinates is image number 6 and image number 10. Instead, I believe that Byron gives us a puzzle within a puzzle to figure these two out. Most of you are already aware of the rebus in image number 10. Well, image 6 isn't exactly like that, but I'll explain here in a few more minutes. That being said, let's get to what you came for. Here we have image number 1. First, let's take a look at the image I showed you from the previous episode where I overlaid a map of California onto the painting to match up the state. I also want to point out some of the finer details of how the state fits here that I forgot to mention in the last episode. Take a look at the last curl of the woman's hair just above her right shoulder. You can see that this little notch off the coast of Santa Maria fits perfectly around that little curl in her hair. I'm going to get a bit ahead of myself here, but the second line of verse 7, which matches up with this painting, reads, "The air smells sweet." Now, while the state is in this position, I want you to take a look at the rose and how San Francisco is positioned right on top of the rose, where it would make the air smell sweet. This particular painting not only gives us the state, but within the state it also gives us a possible city. Interesting, right? Well, this isn't the only time that happens in a painting. The coordinates 37 and 38 and 122 and 123 from the previous step gives us a wide search area in California, which stretches from the area just north of Santa Cruz up to just northwest of Sacramento, then west to just off the coast of Manchester State Park, then south to a location out in the Pacific Ocean to the west of Santa Cruz. The only major city on the water in this grid would be San Francisco. Now, let me draw your attention to this shape right here. Then I'm going to turn the painting this way. To me, this looks a lot like a genie's lamp. Now, let's see a map of this major California waterway, and I'll turn it this way. You can see that it matches up almost exactly with the genie's lamp in the painting, which confirms the waterway around San Francisco, California, as the location for this painting. Here we have image number 2. Using the coordinates 32 and 33 and 79 and 80 from the previous step, gives us our search area in South Carolina from just east of Savannah, Georgia, up to Columbia, South Carolina, then all the way over to just northwest of Myrtle Beach, then south to a location out in the Atlantic Ocean just east of Savannah, Georgia. The only major city in this grid is Charleston, South Carolina. Let's take a look at this shape in the African mask, and then let's see a map of this major South Carolina waterway. You can see that they match up almost exactly, confirming the waterway around Charleston, South Carolina, as the correct location for this painting. Now let's take a look at this shape in the painting. At first glance, it kind of looks like home plate in baseball, but it actually represents Fort Sumter National Monument in the harbor around Charleston. You can even see this represented right here in the aerial view of Charleston in the painting. This is image number 3, and using the coordinates 35 and 36 and 75 from the previous step, gives us a search area mostly within the northeastern part of North Carolina, the area known as the Outer Banks. Now I'm going to draw your attention to this shape right here in the painting. I found this information on the wiki, and they cite wiki user Drummond as the one that figured this out. If you look at a map of this major waterway in North Carolina, you can see that the scythe and all the gadgets hanging from the arm match up to the waterways in the map, confirming the area known as the Outer Banks as the location for this image. Thanks to wiki user Drummond, and since I knew that other paintings had representations of waterways as well, that's how I figured out that all of the paintings have an aerial representation of a major waterway around a major city. The fourth line of verse 11 reads, "To the land near the window." Now take a look at this shape right here in the painting, and you can see that it's almost the exact shape of Roanoke Island near the window in the painting. This confirms Roanoke Island as a location for this painting, and it also confirms a matchup with verse 11. Here we have image number 4, the casque for which has already been recovered and confirmed to be in Cleveland, Ohio. Using the coordinates 41 and 42 and 81 from the previous step, gets us close to a very small area surrounding the major city of Cleveland, Ohio. Now let's take a look at an aerial view of the major waterway near those coordinates, which would give us Lake Erie. Then I'll place the painting underneath it. You can see where this section of the Lake Erie shoreline matches up with Cleveland, which confirms the waterway around Cleveland, Ohio, as the correct location for this painting. Much like I showed you in image number 1, another way Byron gives us a city is by looking at a representation of the state within the painting itself. Here is the aerial view of Ohio within the painting, and if you look right here, you can actually see where Cleveland is circled in the aerial view of the state. Byron also gives us the iconic Cleveland Terminal Tower as confirmation that we have the correct city. Here we have image number 5, the casque for which has also been recovered and confirmed to be in Chicago, Illinois. Using the coordinates 41 and 87 from the previous step, gets us to this area near Chicago, Illinois. Now I'll draw your attention to this area right here, which is where part of the hat hangs down and makes it look like an earlobe. Let's put a map of this major waterway of Lake Michigan next to it, and you can see that the hat's earlobe is meant to represent Lake Michigan. Then, where the piercing goes through the earlobe, you can see that it's right around the area of Chicago. The earring through the earlobe is actually an extension down to the jewel, which confirms that the casque is in Chicago. Then, Byron gives us iconic monuments like the Bowman, Chicago Water Tower, and the Great Lakes Fountain to confirm that Chicago is the correct city for this painting. Here we have image number 6. Now, since I don't believe this painting has any representations of a latitude or a longitude, we have to consider another way to figure out where to look. Remember when I said Byron gave us a puzzle within a puzzle for this image, but it wasn't like the rebus in image number 10? Well, here's how I figured it out. The clues from the reading portion of the book mentioned 2 Native American tribes in Florida, which were the Timucua and Calusa Native Americans. Following that hint, I found that the Timucua tribe lived in the northeastern region of Florida, and the Calusa tribe lived in the southwestern region of Florida. So that gives us our two places within Florida that it possibly could be. Byron, of course, gives us our clue on which one it is in the painting, but I've never seen it mentioned anywhere, which is why I think a lot of people struggle with the true location within Florida. You see, it isn't until we overlay a map of Florida onto the painting that the real reason for the sharp points in the right side of the rock becomes clear. The only part of the western coastline of Florida that does not match up with the painting is around the area of Steinhatchee. This discrepancy isn't like the others though. Now I know that I told you a lot of the representations aren't going to be exact scale and proportion to what we can find on Google Maps today, but this one is different. This discrepancy is intentional, and it actually takes the shape of a facial profile. But the profile isn't what we need to focus on. What we need to focus on is the direction where the profile is actually looking, which is straight towards St. Augustine. This visual representation narrows down our search area to the northeastern coast of Florida. Now, so far, all of the representations of waterways in the paintings prior to this one have been pretty large in their representation. I believe this painting is a little bit different simply because of how I had to go about finding the region. Now, let me draw your attention to this area in the Rock of Gibraltar, which connects this painting to Spain. If I put a map of this major waterway in St. Augustine next to it, you can see that it represents an aerial view of the waterways around Anastasia Island, complete with Salt Run right here, confirming the waterway around St. Augustine, Florida as the correct location for this painting. Then Byron goes a step further, and he gives us the Conquistador at the top, which connects us specifically to St. Augustine, and he gives us the Matanzas River in the shape of the flag. This is image number 7, and using the coordinates 29 and 90 from the previous step gets us to an area near New Orleans, Louisiana. Now, if you take a look at the cuff and this major Louisiana waterway near those coordinates, which is the Mississippi River where it runs through New Orleans, you can see that it matches up with the shape of the cuff, confirming New Orleans as the correct location for this painting. Now we can connect this painting to verse number 2, which begins, "At the place where jewels abound," and of course Mardi Gras is an iconic event in New Orleans where imitation jeweled necklaces are tossed out to spectators from parade floats. Here we have image number 8, and using the coordinates 30 and 95 and 96 from the previous step gets us to an area near Houston, Texas. Now I'm going to draw your attention to this shape of a rhinoceros at the top of this column here. Then let's take a look at a map of this major waterway in Texas, and you can see that it matches up with the rhinoceros. This confirms the waterway around Houston, Texas as the correct location for this painting. Then Byron takes it a step further and gives us this tree branch. Now take a look at the map of this river that branches off from the major waterway I just mentioned. The shapes match up, confirming the Houston area as the location for this painting. It's genius that Byron actually used a branch to show us that we need to look further inland where the river branches off from a major waterway. Here we have image number 9, and using the coordinates 45 and 73 from the previous step gets us to the area of Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Now let me draw your attention to this part of the painting, which is the mouth of what I like to call the Mona Lisa Man. Now let's take a look at this major waterway, and we can see that they match up, confirming Montreal, Quebec, Canada as the correct location for this painting. Byron confirms Montreal as the correct city with the iconic leg eater lamp. Here we have image number 10. Since there aren't any representations of coordinates in this painting, Byron instead gives us another puzzle within a puzzle to solve. The rebus gives us a millstone, a walking stick, and a key, confirming Milwaukee as the city for this painting. The only major waterway in Wisconsin is Lake Michigan, and the only major city in Wisconsin on this lake would be Milwaukee. Now I'm going to draw your attention to the folds in the woman's left sleeve. Let's take a look at a map of Milwaukee, and you can see that the folds match up with this network of rivers in Milwaukee, which I have absolutely no clue how to pronounce, so I'm not even going to try because I don't want to butcher it. Either way, it confirms this waterway in Milwaukee as the correct location for this painting. Then Byron confirms Milwaukee with City Hall atop the hill. This is image number 11, and using the coordinates 42 and 71 from the previous step gets us to the area near Boston, Massachusetts. I want to point out something that I didn't really expand on a whole lot in the previous episode. The aerial view of the state in this painting, shown in relief below the window and beside the woman's hair, it doesn't have the hard lines that you can see in some of the other paintings. It really only gives us 2 points of reference. It gives us this little V shape right here on the coast, and then the notch in the wall is a representation of a major lake in Massachusetts. You can see how when I match them up together, both the V's match up along with the position of the lake within the painting. With those coordinates, let's take a look at this major waterway in Boston. Now take a look at the edge of the woman's hair, and you can see that the waterways in Boston match up with the choppy outline of her hair, confirming the waterway around Boston as the correct location for this painting. Byron also gives us the Boston University castle on the box that the woman is holding to confirm that we have the right city. Here we have image number 12, and using the coordinates 41 and 74 from the previous step gets us to the southeastern area of the state of New York, where I think it pretty much funnels our sight down towards the city of New York and Long Island. Take a look at this part of the painting that at first glance just looks like a bunch of warped lines. Then let's see a map of New York City. If you look right here, you can make out all of the land masses surrounding New York Harbor. Here's Manhattan, and here's Long Island, confirming New York Harbor as the correct location for this painting. Then Byron gives us repetition of some of these land masses to tell us that New York Harbor is the right place. Here is the shape of Manhattan, represented upside down in the sash around the woman's waist that hangs down. And here is the shape of Staten Island, also represented upside down at the bottom of the woman's robes. Then Byron gives us the most obvious representation of an iconic New York landmark, with the woman in the painting being a representation of the Statue of Liberty, which I spoke about in the last episode. Well, there you have it, what I believe to be a representation of the city in each of the paintings. Again, Byron gives us repetition to show us that we're on the right track. Just remember not to let the landmarks fool you into thinking that they're more important than they actually are. If they were important, you would see repetition. If you liked this video, if you thought it was helpful, please give me a thumbs up. If you aren't already subscribed, just click on our picture. And if you'd like to be notified of when we upload our next video, just tap the bell. Feel free to comment below, but like I said in the previous episode, please be respectful. I do share this YouTube channel with my teenage daughter, and there's enough bullying out there in the world already, so there's no need for ugliness on here, especially since I'm giving out my Preiss Code steps for everyone to see and to help them with their search. As I said, I think I have them figured out, but it's all completely subjective until a casque is actually located. Stay tuned for the next episode where I'll go over the next step in the Preiss Code. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next adventure.